way you lie. Well, no one told me about it, how people cry. Well, it's too late to say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I care? There's no bother trying to find him. He's not there. Well, let me tell you about the way he looks, the way he acts, and the color of his hair. His voice is soft and good, his eyes are clear and bright, but he's not there.
Hey, welcome back to the channel JHIMTG, which are the first letters of the name of the book. Jimmy Hoffa is Missing the Gap. I'm the author and your moderator for the channel. And so I ask you to basically subscribe, follow, like, and share with as many people as you can this story, because you're not going to hear it from anywhere else. The book, if you have all these rumors and stories, movies, blogs, whatever in your mind, and you're reading this book, you need to dismiss them. You need to get rid of them, because the book is in chronological order. In other words, from the time that the events occurred. And these rumors came out as soon as the abduction happened, and there were hundreds, if not thousands, of different leads. And I want you to just clear all that clutter out of your mind. Otherwise, you're not going to really absorb this information in the perspective that it was experienced. So chapter 2 is about our growing up in Detroit. So growing up in Detroit, to give you a little background and the backstory to the eyewitness account, my dad and I both experienced a little bit of contact with the mob. And my father was in the restaurant business, as I've told you. In the early 60s was about the second time that he would have had some contact with the unions at Hoffa. Maybe not have met him in person, but he was on the opposite side of the negotiating table. He was involved with management, being in the restaurant business. The waiters, waitresses, busboys, bartenders, anybody that worked in hospitality would have been in the union, except for a handful of restaurants, in which case my dad was successful in keeping the employees from joining the union, even though there were picketers and strikers out in front of the restaurant. Darby's in particular had a lot of employees that the union would have loved to have signed on, but because Dad treated them fairly, they had no need to join the union. They made just the same amount of money and got the benefits without paying the union dues. So Detroit was rift with the Mafia, especially in the restaurant business. The vendors, the suppliers, linen companies, the napkin printers, the juice vendors, the meat and food and produce suppliers, and even restaurants themselves were either fronts or legitimate businesses that also were in the restaurant industry. My dad worked at Darby's when we first moved to Detroit in 1960. He answered an ad as a waiter, and he needed the job. There were 3 of us kids. He and my mom were living with us in my aunt and uncle's house on Penrod and Michigan Ave, and 2 cousins. It was a full house, and he needed to start bringing in income so we could get a place of our own. We just moved up from the south, as I think I told you in an earlier blog. So right away, Sam Boeski realized this experience level and made him general manager of Darby's in 1960 as soon as he started. He worked there until 1968. So Darby's, though, in the 60s was really becoming a very famous place. It was kosher style food, had a lot of Jewish clientele that came there. Sam Boeski thought it'd be neat if, even though we weren't Jewish, that my dad would become an honorary rabbi. So my dad carried a yarmulke in his suit coat jacket pocket. And he could bless the food, make it officially kosher before it was served. He knew preparation, had a lot of special dishes. The menu items, recipes were actually kept in a vault when Darby's eventually burned down in 1968. So that's how valued and treasured the recipes were. Over time, my dad became really familiar with the inner circle of Samboeski and the people that came in to Darby's. He had to know them personally by name because he would seat everyone that came in the door, knew their favorite table, their favorite meals, knew how they wanted them prepared, knew their names from their faces. And he would actually go into the kitchen and tell the chef, so-and-so's here, this is how they like their food. And that was his involvement. Plus, he managed every employee. He decided where and the food came from and all the supplies. So he had a pretty hefty role there at Darby's for those 8 years. He learned to love Samboeski. Sam loved him. I gotta say that was a very close, respectful relationship. My dad never delved in the social life of Samboeski. He accepted it, kept his distance, and survived and flourished that way. Along about 1968 is when my dad was offered a car from Samboeski because he was upgrading to a newer style Continental. And so he had a 1959 black Mark IV Lincoln Continental with white leather interior. It was a nice car. I got to drive it on occasion when I was in high school on Woodward Avenue cruising with my buddies. But my dad loved that car. When he first got it, he got in it, driving it home. Sam said he could pay for it out of his paycheck, made it real easy for him to buy, and he jumped on it. So he drives it home. We didn't know the story till he got home, that he had stopped for gas, and when the gas station attendant was through, he walked up to the window and said, "You're a lucky man. This car had a fuse in the gas tank and it fell out. You're supposed to blow up when you started this car." We heard the story when he came home. His face was white as a ghost, stammering, told us what happened, and struck fear in him. Although he had kept his distance, now this really affected him, life or death. He never told Samboeski, and he never went to the police. So this was kind of a forgotten episode at Darby's. He did keep the car, but he soon started looking for another job. And he did leave Darby's early summer of 1968. Darby's was kind of rumored to have some differences with the union for one reason or another. And so my dad kind of believed that this bombing incident had more to do with Samboeski than him. But he had just changed juice companies from Home Juice to a little less expensive juice company, non-Mafia, I take it. But he just learned to respect that when you're ordering supplies from these companies, you face retaliation if you choose to go elsewhere. So the 60s were starting to get kind of violent in Detroit amongst the Detroit Mafia families. One in particular involved Darby's. It had burnt down in 1968. On July 15th, I believe, it was Samboeski's birthday, I do know that. And there were 2 carloads of colored men, they said in the newspaper, that had gas cans and jumped into these cars. And they tore away from Darby's as it exploded into flames and burned down. And so that was in the news, a big deal. Actually, Boeski got his insurance money eventually. They called it arson, but he eventually got it and opened up a place called Stanley Steamer on 8 Mile and Schaefer, which was the same as Coolidge. And we lived at 9 Mile, which was just outside of Detroit. That was Oak Park and Coolidge. Detroit ended at 8 Mile. So what happened in August 18th of 1975 was a car was towed over and discovered in back of Darby's. It was burnt out and shut down. The car belonged to Judy Ruggiero, the wife of a mobster, Ruggiero, in Detroit. And her car keys and her purse were in the car, but her body wasn't. Rumor is it was disposed of at Central Sanitation. At the time, it would have been Tri-County, and they serviced Wayne County, Oakland County. It could have been Macomb County, another county in the Tri-County area. It wasn't until 1974 they became known and changed their name to Central Sanitation. So I didn't work for my dad, though, at that time, not at Darby's, till 1968, 69, when he left Darby's and went to Rotunda Country Inn out in Pontiac, off Pine Lake, Orchard Lake Road, I believe, Pine Lake Road. And so I worked for him for the first time as a busboy, and I loved it because I got to know my dad a lot better because his only day off was Monday at all those years at Darby's. Always worked holidays, Father's Day, Mother's Day, you know. And Mondays was his day off, which was a school day. And one occasion was on a Monday, he would always cook his favorite dish. One in particular was called Welsh rarebit, not rabbit. People thought it was a rabbit dish, but it was a melted cheese dish, and it was a New England recipe. And he used had to be New York sharp cheese for that bite, I guess. And he would melt it down in a boiler, and then he'd add egg yolk, Worcestershire sauce. There would also be some either cayenne pepper, dry mustard, and also at the end, when you put it over saltine crackers, you would sprinkle paprika on it and put a dollop of chutney on the side. I didn't care for chutney. I used jelly or strawberry jam. And then he would drink the Valentine ale along with it. But that was one of our kids' favorites. And so there was one Monday that came along, though, and for some reason I just wanted to stay home and be with Dad. And I made up some cockamamie story that I couldn't find any white socks, so I can't go to school today. And he and I went around for, must have been 30 minutes or so. And I won out. I got to stay home, but I just was not going to go to school that day. Then he realized I just wanted to be with him. It was his day off. So he eased up, and I was allowed out of my room. So because he had been a meat cutter before, he liked his meat rare. You could still hear the moo. And my mom liked it brown and well done. She'd even put ketchup on the meat. If it was a roast beef, my dad got upset about ruining the meat if she put ketchup on it. There were some arguments over that sometimes. Now, he was, like I said, always fighting the union. So he was the opposite side of the negotiating table from Hoffa and the unions. But he had to be aware of who was who. So my experience with the unions, though, my first union job, it was 1968, the summer. I had met an Italian girl from Dearborn, and we hung out for a couple of years until we went to different schools. I went to Eastern. She went to Western after high school in 69, 70. So I met her at the Rooster Tail. They had an underage night where if you weren't 21, you could come, and you couldn't drink, of course. Right on the river in Detroit. And their bar band was Rare Earth. Rare Earth became known nationally for their hit tune, Get Ready. And nice place to go for a kid, a high school kid. But we hung out after that really close. I would drive to Dearborn all the time. I was in Oak Park. And so we became really close. Her mom was separated, divorced, and she was outgoing. She had worked at, I'll say, Ward's on Michigan Ave and sales. So she was talkative, very outgoing personality, and she knew a lot of people by name. And most Italians in Dearborn knew all the other Italians anyway. It was kind of an enclave for Italians, some Middle Easterns, and others. And so it was not unusual. We went to go see a friend of hers one time, my girlfriend and I and her mom. And my girlfriend and I sat at one table out in the backyard. It was a peninsula, so you could see water on all three sides. Nice day, and summer of '68. And then the adults sat at another picnic table talking. We didn't hear them, but I was talking to my girlfriend. And I said, I found out that this was Tony Giacalone and his wife Zena Giacalone. I said, aren't the Giacalones in the Mafia? She says, yeah, and we're not involved with that, of course. And so she said, but the brother, and she was referring to Vito Giacalone, isn't in the Mafia anymore. He got out. And I'm thinking, you don't get out of the Mafia, you're in it for life. So anyway, I wasn't scared. Most people functioned fine. They didn't have any run-ins with the Mafia, so they didn't have anything to be afraid of. And they seemed very nice. They were cordial, didn't talk a lot. I was known as the boyfriend, I guess, of the family that they were close with. And I guess trusted enough to come over to the house. And I was only 17 at the time. Just started to grow my hair long and grow a Fu Manchu mustache out of high school, though that was 69. So at this time, though, I was still pretty clean cut. One time after, when we were leaving, Zena handed me a box of cookies and said, here, take this home to your family. I said, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And then we went back again around Christmas time. She gave me some more cookies, and they appeared to be homemade. I don't know if she made them, but they weren't store-bought and packaged. They were in a little baker's box, I guess, but one that you might make homemade cookies and put in. And by now she had heard that my girlfriend's mom was close to my mother, and she wanted to meet her. Said, here, take these home to your mother. She'll enjoy them. So okay, thank you. Merry Christmas. And so I did take them home, gave them to my mom, told her where I'd been. And I told you the story about my dad and the Mafia and the home juice company that was owned by the Giacalones. Now, I didn't know it at the time. My dad did. And so I come home. My mom is invited to go with me and my girlfriend and her mother with the Giacalones. And their treat, they were going to provide the transportation and everything and go to the Fisher Theater, which was kind of the place to go if you went to go see a performance in Detroit. Fisher Theater was ornate, a lot of handcrafted or tooled detail inside. If I have a picture, I'll put it up. And so we went to see the Supremes. We rode in one limousine, and the Giacalones rode in another. And there were other cars in this entourage. I didn't pay attention to how many or who was where. I just knew we got to ride in a limo, and that was cool. So my mom and I, my girlfriend and her mom in the limo. We get to the Fisher Theater, then we go out for dinner afterwards, and same seating arrangement and separate limos. We stop in an Italian restaurant. Don't remember if it was on Michigan Ave or Ford Road, but it was an Italian place that we go in. There's about 10 of us sitting at a long table. I guess it was all ready for us. I didn't see anybody else eating in there, though. At the time, I didn't know if it was closed and they just opened for us or what. And then we're sitting down, and I'm next to my girlfriend. I see behind us there's 4 or 5 guys, tall guys, with trench coats, hats, and their hands in their pockets, and they're not eating with us. They're just watching us. So got a little edgy, but I wasn't threatened. I didn't feel afraid. And it was a nice dinner. We were being treated by the Giacalones. After that, one other time came up where we were all invited, including my mom again, to a wedding for one of Giacalone's daughters at a different Italian restaurant. Again, it was either Ford Road. I think it was Ford Road this time. And I think it was Mario's, but I'm not certain. So it wasn't real plush, but it was big enough for a small gathering. And so as we're being seated, there's a greeting line after the wedding, and my girlfriend nudges me. She says, so when are you going to go congratulate the father of the bride? I was a little nervous, but I said, well, I got to, to myself, I'm saying, well, I got to show her how brave I am. I wasn't afraid either, so, but I went on up. I said, well, congratulations, Mr. Giacalone, and I shook his hand. I smiled. I think he smiled back. And then I went back, and she says, oh, that was great. So I passed the test.
His voice was soft and good, his eyes were clear and bright.